All right. Hello. As all of you know, I'm Alex Tarnava, the CEO of Drink HRW. I'm here with my co-founder, Richard Holland, Dr. Holland. I've mentioned him in a lot of my talks and writing, and he was absolutely paramount in the early days and has a very important role now. Now, Richard, why don't you tell us, because I've told the story and people laugh about your initial skepticism. You know, the first email you sent me when I tried to hire you to look over what I was doing, and kind of the next few months and how you gained a bit of interest.
Yeah, so I was just doing some casual consulting, and Alex responded to one of my advertisements as a hired gun, and we had a short conversation via text backwards and forwards, and he kind of gave a very broad overview of what he was trying to do, and my initial reaction, I went online and I looked at the solubility of molecular hydrogen in water, and I just did not think that there was any way that you could get to a sufficient concentration in water to have any therapeutic value. Moreover, I didn't think that there would be any bioavailability of molecular hydrogen once you ingested it anyway. So I very quickly shot Alex a text back saying, "This isn't going to work. I've just saved you $200 in consulting fees. You're welcome." But Alex, being who he is, he's a very determined individual, and he already knew his stuff, and he responded saying, "No, look at these peer-reviewed papers," and there was a Nature paper in there amongst others, and it became apparent at that point that there was a there. And then beyond that, we were trying to reverse engineer a formulation and trying to design a better one. And I just became interested in the methodology of just breaking apart the tablet and putting it back together to design what ended up being the best product on the market. So I got interested in the science and the methodology of just the product design of the magnesium tablets.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not unusual that you'd have that reaction. I started learning right away that anyone who understood, chemistry and biochemistry at all said that's ridiculous, right? But the replicated data from dozens of teams across the world showing that it is doing something led us to start doing more research in why is it doing something, what's going on, and that's kind of been the last 12 years of research is 13 years of research. Why is it doing this? Yeah. Like this doesn't make any sense, and now slowly the pieces are starting to come together on how it's doing what it's doing, why it's doing what it's doing, and that's one of the things about science is it never ends. You don't prove something true, you fail to falsify it. And if something is continuing to show the same results or similar results over numerous replicated teams over time, and the story starts coming together, we have to say, well, it's more likely to be true than not. And hydrogen was just one of those things that it was. I mean, I was skeptical of it, just from the marketing claims that were being made of it being a panacea by everyone into it, which it's not, right? But it does have a wide range of benefits. And yeah, we're just slowly coming to a place where researchers are looking at the data, carefully and going, there's something to this. This is interesting.
Well, I think you're right a different way as well, because you were believing the evidence of your own eyes and your own senses, right? So you were actually trying this product, albeit someone else's product at the time, and you were seeing a net positive improvement in your own personal health. So that led you to just digging deeper and doing the research about what's going on here. But it's not standing still. The underlying mechanisms are still being probed. The full picture is still being determined. And I still think there's more work that can be done to understand the underlying molecular mechanism about why these things are working. And it might be that it probably will be the case that there's not just one locus of action, there's probably a multitude of locuses of action. So it's an area that's ripe for continued research. And that's going to be academic, it's going to be biotech, it's going to be pharmaceutical, and then it's also going to be coming at it from your standpoint as well.
Yeah, I think I remember a comment you made a couple of years ago that with some of the big clinical trials that were underway and some of the benefits coming out, and you said if this keeps on being replicated on larger scales, in 100 years the government will be making everyone drink it.
They'll put it into the water.
Yeah,
just like fluoride.
Yeah.
There was a time before fluoride, and then the results were irrefutable, and then they started adding it to our water.
And even with fluoride, a lot of these cities that have removed it from the water over hysteria, conspiracy theorists on the internet, so to speak, are actually re-adding fluoride to the water because of dental decay and in youth, and they're like, we put this in the water for a reason, and now we took it out, because of fears, and exactly why we put it in, happened again, right? So
it's a scientific experiment in real time on human population.
I mean, for the Canadian listeners, that just happened in Windsor, Ontario, and Calgary, Alberta is putting together a study to look at how negative the effects of removing fluoride were in their water to get it re-added. But it was pretty devastating in Windsor. Yeah. And it brings me into it. I mean, my first notion when I entered this, and I pride myself on being a bit of an autodidact and teaching myself a base level of knowledge in a lot of areas. But I always want to defer to experts, like see what I'm doing wrong, what I'm missing. It's impossible to know what you're doing wrong if you don't understand why you're wrong. And so naturally I wanted to find a PhD chemist, to look at what I'm doing and, do I have errors and how can I do this? Now, talking to a lot of people in say, the natural community, and hydrogen's interesting because it has appeal in the medical research world, but it also has appeal in the natural community, especially with the magnesium. There's this huge suspicion in a lot of people in certain areas about, pharmaceutical scientists. And I have literally heard this in arguments that pharmaceutical scientists, certain natural proponents say that pharmaceutical scientists think that you should just take a pill for everything for cures, and, that you shouldn't be outside in nature or do anything, that just everything is about a pill and this and that. And it's hilarious. I mean, on your Facebook page, and when we text, it's like, oh, I'm not free to talk next weekend. I'm going fishing, or I'm going camping, or I'm going hiking, or I'm going mountain biking. Yeah. So it's just this, lack of, reality in perception. Right, and I mean, you're a real person who enjoys, the outdoors. You have kids, a wife, and I mean, it seems every weekend you're outdoors.
It was my love of nature that actually brought me to BC in Canada in the first place. So I am English by birth, and I was living and working in London, and I was commuting 2 hours to and from each work. So there was a lot of essentially lost time, and then I had the opportunity to come for a vacation to Vancouver and instantly fell in love. And there's a song by John Denver called Rocky Mountain High. And one of the lyrics in that song is he was born in the summer of his 27th year, coming home to a place he'd never been before. And I was at 29, not 27, but I felt an instant affinity with the mountains and the coastal geography of BC, and we took a trip up to Joffrey Lake, which 15 years ago was a hidden gem. It's a little busier up there now. It
looks. I've never been there. I see it all the time on my Facebook scroll. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it's the archetypal picture book glacier mountain lake with a beautiful, very unique color blue. But so yeah, I love nature, and I don't see science and nature as being opposite. I think they're actually one and the same things, and in many cases you'll find examples where nature has actually probably done a better job of designing pharmaceuticals than man can.
It's had millions or billions of years
of evolution, and you know, I think it's a shame. It's one of the tragedies of our time that we are denuding forests, we're destroying biodiversity without fully understanding the possibilities that there could be. We're just walking away. So my first position when I came to Canada, my first job was working for a company that we were trying to develop novel neuropathic pain agents, and the concept from that came from the conotoxin sea snail, which uses a very powerful peptide to overwhelm its prey and kill it. But it turns out that this thing in very, very small doses completely removes neuropathic pain. So it was an example of nature showing how man could adapt and improve beyond that.
And I mean, that's true in a lot of drugs. I mean, even, you know, aspirin is from the bark of a willow tree.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the pharmaceutical industry, what they'll do is they'll take the active component that has the benefit and, you know, will be isolated or modified to have the best impact with the most safety. Right? And that's what's done. But, you know, so much comes from nature, and science by nature is the study of our universe and nature and how everything works. So it just has never made sense to me, this position that, you know, scientists in a lab or, you know, this synthetic thing. No, it's trying to understand the world around us and how everything works. You know?
I can understand a stereotype of a dispassionate scientist, and there are instances of scientists discovering things just because they can and not maybe because they should. And you know, you can give various examples, but there is no one type of scientist.
No.
You know, like they come in many flavors, and you know, I put my pants on same as you do in the morning, one leg at a time, and my priorities are my family, and you know, I look after those. But I do relish the challenge of science. You never know what you're going to discover, what you're going to come up with. It's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And so there's something very gratifying when you do make a breakthrough, or you come to a conclusion and you can move forward. And you know, like I think one of the things that appealed to me about working with you was when we were breaking down the formulations and rebuilding and trying the new formulations, that became a satisfying challenge in and of itself. It's just like, how far can we push this? And you know, you were coming at me with ideas, and I was coming up with some ideas as well, and it's just like, wow, we haven't just hit the benchmark that we wanted to. We've completely blown it out of the water. Yeah,
we went way past where our original target was, and there's a saying that, you know, a challenge once achieved no longer motivates, and that's one of the brilliant, you know, things with most areas of science is there's always a new challenge.
Yeah.
Right? When you figure out something, we are so far away from understanding everything that it's lifetimes of work if it'll ever finish, you know, and it's always new challenges.
But we approached it in a very stepwise, systematic method as well. There was, you know, another thing that I liked about it was there was, and this is one of, because I'm an organic chemist by training, and organic chemistry can be a more loosey-goosey science. You know, a pinch of this, a pinch of that, and see what happens. And there was an element of that when we were doing our design work. Some of the additives that you were thinking of, it was creative, but it was still driven by the systematic moving forward. So.
And something that has come up in some of our filings with the government is, say, trying to explain what we've done in base level chemistry, which you can't do because base level chemistry says what we're doing is impossible, and you have to get into theoretical and abstract chemistry, which was surprising and guesswork, and why is it doing this? And then we were having to go back and think, okay, well, there's this, abstract, law or theory, and then we try and falsify it, and we're like, that's what's going on, and...
Well, with that patent that we got out of that is actually one of the ones that I'm most proud of. I can't remember how many I've got now, but it's quite a few, but that one is a unique one, and I'm very happy with what we achieved. And it was interesting that we got to a level that was so high that there wasn't actually instrumentation around that could measure it. We were kind of having to create the systems to actually measure the level that we were generating.
We're talking to some of these public teams that wanted to validate what we were doing and brainstorming ideas on how to falsify and test and replicate what we're doing, and we eventually did, and it's now been validated in numerous different methods, from gas evolved to the titration to gas chromatography to we've done laser backscattering, and tablets were taken to the University of Beijing, and they used one of the sensitive $20,000 instruments to measure hydrogen, and based on having enough H2 gas to be at 30 psi under 1 atmosphere, it made sense from the nanobubbles inside, and they're hundreds of psi, again validating everything we're doing. But no, there's no one single technology that even exists to measure what we're doing. We've had to use a half a dozen different methods in different ways to put the piece together to go, okay, well, it's adding up to the same or roughly the same in all these different avenues, so I guess we are doing this. And it's actually, something I talked to with Tyler LeBaron on our talk about a month ago. He said it's still sometimes, he goes, oh man, this is just so ridiculous. It's against everything he was taught, but he can't refute the evidence that's been gathered.
But the net result is you have a product that clearly differentiates itself from anything else. Yeah. And if you want to go and get market share, or this is something that essentially sells itself in terms of its differentiating properties.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting. I mean, I'm still interested in some of these international organizations are actually trying to create better methods to just literally test our tablet in a category of its own, because it's the only thing that does it.
There's probably going to be people out there now probably trying to reverse engineer our formulation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to, talk about, I know I'll ping you with, hey, what do you know about this from time to time? And you're always pretty honest. I don't know enough about that to give you advice. And one time you did mention what you had been interested in, and I want to dive into this because there's, again, this prevailing thought, in a lot of communities that, pharmaceuticals only treat symptoms, right? That only, holistic healers treat the whole root. And it's very unfortunate but fortunate. This is odd timing. For the viewers, if you can see these stitches and gashes, and if you can see this red mark, I've been on IV antibiotics for 5 days. I won't go into it, but it should be obvious for most of you. Don't ever try and break up a cat fight with your bare hands, right? I mean, 100 years ago, I could have lost my hand.
Yep.
It was infected. It was going red down my arm, and that was even after the ER doctor, cleaned it all up. And by the way, I mean, I've got complaints of the Canadian medical system, but I was in to see an ER doctor within 12 minutes of the triage nurse, seeing my massacred hand. So it was unbelievable, fast and efficient. And he put me on a fairly strong dose of antibiotic pills to prevent an infection. And 2 days later, I was back at the ER, getting hooked up to my first IV. So, I mean, there's one instance where I would have had to, have my hand amputated. And antibiotics, saved my life and my hand. I mean, and another one that's super interesting coming up that could, cure a lot of diseases before they even start is something you said was an interest in yours in gene editing.
Gene editing, yeah. Well, gene editing is cutting edge technology. It's new and emerging. I mean, I don't know how much you want me to say about that. It's something that in my day job, my company, we are starting to look towards it. The research is very much in its early days.
Yeah.
So the actual delivery of the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, is a challenge in and of itself, and that's something that my company focuses on. With gene editing, it's an interesting one though, because it's basically a one-stop shop, and I think you have to be very careful about your selection of indications and getting appropriate systemic versus focused delivery. But yeah, I could see that replacement of faulty or absent genes would be of huge medical value.
Yeah, and I mean, I more bring this up just to, I think it's really important to kind of bridge in a lot of this communication that some of the issues that say people would have, with big pharma are the same in the natural community, money, corruption, bureaucracy getting in the way. But at its base, most, legitimate scientists on either side of the fence just care about things that are safe and effective, getting them to work, because as you said, you care first and foremost about your family. Anything that's being developed will be used on your family, and it's crazy to think that there'd be these tens of thousands or millions of scientists actively doing evil, on the population.
I don't know if they there aren't many people, if any, that actively wake up today and say, I am going to do evil in my research. But I do think one has to be very careful with the application. With great power comes great responsibility. So an example would be splitting the atom.
Yeah.
So splitting the atom, you can generate huge amounts of energy, which could be used to power stations to make electricity for everyone.
Yeah.
But it can also be used to make weapons. And sometimes, and this might play into the negative stereotype of a scientist. Just because you can do something, should you do something? And a more going back to gene editing and a more relevant current topic is that there are now alive and in China the first humans
gene edited babies.
Gene editing as part of their genetic makeup.
It's coming up that more people, other than that one scientist, probably knew about it. I mean, China's so surveilled. How did his supervisors not know what he was doing?
No, everyone knew about it, and it was done in China because it would not be that research would not be allowed in North America. Now, those edited genes now, if those two kids go on to have offspring,
they'll be passed on.
So that genie is out of the box, and that essentially is an uncontrolled experiment. We don't know if that is going to be good, negative, neutral. We just don't know. So, as I said, just because something can be done, should it be done? An example which I think could be interesting, and I don't even know if this is technically possible, but I learned a little while ago that elephants don't get cancer. So you'd think just because cancer is a genetic disease, and the more cells you have, the more chance one of those cells can become aberrant. That's just math. So just on a...
And we have, millions of these mutated cells in our bodies all the time, and by cancer, it's just kind of when they hijack our telomere system and are able to replicate out of control.
So cells are undergoing DNA damage the whole time, just from natural metabolic processes. If you go out in the sunlight, UV will cause damage. But the body has, cells have defense mechanisms that either repair DNA damage, or if it's non-repairable, they will kill the cell, so these cells aren't reproducing. And cancer is basically uncontrolled cellular proliferation.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where it's too big, and so you compromise your organs, or and that's essentially what kills you. Now, it turns out that so elephants, because they have far more cells in their body than humans, they should get cancer a lot more frequently than humans, but in fact they don't. And genetic mining has shown that they have a gene called LIF1, which essentially eliminates all cancers. Humans have a very similar one called P53, but it's just not as effective as LIF1. And P53 is one of the common ones. So, for example, if you get lung cancer, cigarette smoke, one of the first targets is it eliminates P53, and that's one of the reasons why cigarette smoke will give you cancer and kill you. So, just as a blue sky thinking for gene editing, it's potentially possible that you could put this elephant gene into humans and eliminate all cancer in human beings. Now, the question then becomes, should you do that? Just because you can do that, should you do that? Do we want people to live for 150 years or 200 years? This
is something, Richard and I have talked about and debated, quite a bit, because I am a, proponent in, indefinite lifespan, not living forever, but, I think if we were given the option that we could return you to the body and mind you had when you were 20, 30 years old, for 10 more years, at what point do you say no?
Yeah. There is a debate going on, and it's an active one, and it's a controversial one, that is death a disease? Because something eventually catches up with you, be it cancer or heart attacks, but these are just byproducts of our physical system. And as our knowledge is getting more and more in depth and involved, we're finding new ways to actually just maintain these physical systems. So if you don't get sick, then theoretically, yes, you can massively extend your lifespan.
And health span, and a lot of people...
Because that's the net result. So you're addressing these health issues as they come up, so they're not contributing to morbidity.
And a lot of people, when they think about, dramatically extending, lifespan, they think about living another 100 years as a frail, 100-year-old person, a geriatric, and that's just not the case, because if aging was addressed at its root, you'd be living those 100 years with a healthy body and mind, not ravaged by the damages of age. And it's one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit, and this is more bureaucracy than it is, the ability of science or anything, that right now pharmaceutical companies have their hands tied because, organizations like the FDA don't consider aging to be a disease. So you couldn't, even if a pharmaceutical company wanted to spend billions of dollars to reverse aging, you wouldn't be able to get an IND on it. You wouldn't be able to do this unless you showed that you treated or cured a disease in doing it.
Death isn't a single disease.
Yeah.
It's a panoply of diseases. So it's one of many that you potentially could get. So some people have a genetic tendency to have cancer, and that might be different between you and me. Yeah. Some people can smoke all their life and just never get cancer, and other people will get cancer in their childhood and die. Yeah. So but those kind of things can be studied, understood, and addressed on a mechanistic basis. So even though the human body is fantastically complicated, it's not infinitely complicated. There is a physical limit which suggests that it is possible at some point to basically understand pretty much everything and then eliminate it. But what you can't eliminate is living. And what I mean by that is every time, as I said, every time you go outside and expose yourself to UV, you're causing yourself some damage. So you can extend your lifespan by removing all of these kind of risk factors. One of the great sources of free radicals that cause cancer is just by eating. So, but you're not going to stop eating, and you're probably not going to...
Or breathing oxygen.
Or going outside. So, it's part of the human condition that you are exposing yourself to risk just by living. So, but yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be possible to extend lifespan significantly. It used to be the dogma that one of the problems is that the brain cells don't reproduce, but actually that is not the case. So the idea was that your body could live forever, but your mind would always just degenerate because you're not generating new brain cells. But actually, you have neuroplasticity, and you do get new brain cell generation. So, and there's actually a pretty high turnover. I find this an interesting fact that all of the cells in your body, including your brain cells, are replaced. So who you were as a kid, that isn't actually you. Cellularly, you are completely different, although you still remember stuff. I find that kind of a fascinating concept.
So that kind of, out of, your self-experience that I know pretty much everyone feels, where you look back at your past and you think that you're watching a movie or remembering someone else's past. That's actually true, because it wasn't you.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was actually just a different version of you, which is, like memory is a fascinating thing. It's, it's purely subjective, and just that leads into discussions around consciousness, and probably a little too philosophical in the context of this discussion, but interesting nonetheless.
We've had a couple of those conversations.
We have. Better done over a glass of wine, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up, that sometimes the question is, should you do it, not can you do it? And it's something that you've been really helpful. Like, now that we've really gotten a better understanding about our tablet and everything we're doing, as I get passionate and enthusiastic and go down other, areas, sometimes I close myself off to the world. My friends, my common law spouse, all know this, that I'll just be in my own world and, not even realize, what day it is or what time it is. And I'm reading in the middle of the night, and I'm sleeping 2-3 hours a day, and it could go on for months on end. Yeah. And I'll start firing these long essay-like texts to you on my thoughts, and so often, I think what happens with a lot of companies is when a CEO starts doing this, everyone around them starts thinking of ways to make it happen and prove it right. And you're often just quite blunt with me. What's your goal here? Like, what do you want to do? Or that sounds very expensive to actually prove your hypothesis. You might be in for millions. And then we start, having more of a sober conversation about it and thinking, okay, like, maybe I have some sound reasoning on some things, but how are we going to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think of you, and this is, you're an ideas guy. You're a concept-driven thinker, and when you get onto something, you immerse yourself in it deeply, and you make yourself an expert very, very quickly. And I can imagine, people like Steve Jobs were like this as well. They had more thoughts than the ability to execute them. So my background as a pharmaceutical scientist, we tend to be very project and objective driven, and I think that sometimes it's useful for our interactions to kind of the 10 ideas that you have, let's see where there's a there. Like, what are the ones? What are you actually trying to achieve? Because I see the way that you read literature, and it will produce 10 more ideas, 10 more papers that you read. Then you read those 10 papers, and that generates another 10 ideas. And you know, it's enthusiasm,
Yeah.
but sometimes the enthusiasm needs to be tempered, and I provide a good balance maybe to your.
And it's what's important, and you know, I said originally when I sought you out is I've always had this you know, enthusiasm for what I'm doing, but I'm well aware of you know, Dunning-Kruger, and you know, when you start getting a little bit of knowledge on something, you think you're an expert and confident, and you know, that's why I always want to bounce things back on people who I know to be more of an expert than I am.
But with it, you know, I don't think it hurts to be to second guess yourself. But in my experience, I've always been very impressed with the depth and breadth of your knowledge, and your ability to get up to speed on a subject very, very quickly. And I actually find myself playing catch up with you a lot of the time. So I'll get a text from Alex at 2 o'clock in the morning and just like, oh, I guess I better hit the books tomorrow and just start educating myself. You know, but I, you know, I've learned a lot. The other thing that I can provide as a counterbalance though is that you are potentially limited by the tools at your disposal. So you know, I can use pretty advanced search techniques, structure techniques, and when I look at the compounds, you look at one that's perhaps available as an OTC or as a byproduct of a spice or a food ingredient or something that is associated with these. And then when I look at it, I see the compound and I think, okay, this would be a great start for a pharmaceutical program, and this is how I would do it, and do it in a very stepwise scientific method. And perhaps the two techniques feed off each other.
Absolutely, and I mean, you've had some great ideas on how to do some things on, you know, no budget or, you know, limited budget on how to start validating some of my thoughts. I mean, even you know, with yours and your colleagues' suggestion to, you know, just measure the temperature on my back, you know, and you know, being N1 on my own, you know, bad activation study, you know.
But you know, just where you've got to walk before you can run. And you know, I can definitely foresee a time when you might have a $5 million budget to spend on a laboratory and some very in-depth settings. That isn't the case now, but doesn't mean that you can't do anything. And you know, sometimes you've got to bootstrap an idea to get it off the ground.
Absolutely, and that involves, you know, both talking to experts, numerous experts, to be critical, but also to give input, and that's kind of what I've done, you know, with you know, Richard and others. Is I bounce these ideas in so many places, and it breeds, like you said, you'll give me 10 articles and I read them. Now I have more ideas and I send them, you know, elsewhere, and you know, it starts flowing in idea.
I think also that is where true innovation happens. And you know, I'm a great believer in the maxim of necessity is the mother of invention. And you can get pharmaceutical companies with budgets of $100 million and an army of scientists, and they're not actually making, it's not a linear path. There is diminishing returns. And so you actually get a lot of value out of the innovation at this level.
And speaking of that, I know we've kind of chuckled about, you know, the first, you know, tablet on record was from the Max Planck Institute, that they were trying to, you know, patent it as a drug. And they had an entire team at the fourth largest research institution in the world. And they developed their tablet using like base level chemistry that they thought was accurate, and it didn't work in practice.
Yeah, and you and I did our initial experiments in our kitchens, and you know, we were pressing the tablets one by one individually as you needed to, but we still came up with a fantastic product. So you know, like Apple became the biggest company in the world out of a business that started in someone's garage, and you know, like hopefully this turns into that as well.
I hope so, and I want to just touch base on one last thing, and there's again, and I'll use this term, you know, this prevailing belief, you know, in the skeptical community that you know, pharmaceuticals are evidence-based and, you know, supplements aren't. And that doesn't have to be true. And a lot of it comes down to bureaucracy and what you have to do to appease the government, because what we're trying to, you know, deliver here, and I mean, you have been, even when I get enthusiastic, you'll say, how are we going to prove this? You need to know it works. Sure, it's a shiny idea, right? But how are we going to validate it? You know,
in a reasonable time frame,
yeah,
for a reasonable cost as well.
Exactly, right? So what's really important is, you know, that something's safe and effective.
Absolutely.
Right?
Safety first.
Exactly. That, you know, we see it works and we can prove it works. And, you know, regulations, bureaucracy is second. You know, we have to oblige by them. But I don't think the supplement industry can be faulted by having a different set of regulations than the pharmaceutical industry, as long as you're pursuing evidence, and safety.
They're different institutions, and I think that they're trying to achieve different things. With that said, I think that there's increasingly crossover, and people are. My analogy is, if you're going to the shops, you can take a Ferrari, which in my analogy would be a pharmaceutical company spending $100 million, or you could take a Mini Cooper, which would be something more like us, but they both get you to where you need to go. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. And
you've told me about the comparison between the one drug and omega-3.
Yeah, and so for example, there's a possibility to use a very complicated nucleic acid, which can cut down an mRNA to stop production of a protein, and that will have an effect on your triglyceride levels. And that would be a fairly expensive treatment. However, you can get a very similar effect by taking omega-3 fatty acids, which are derived from fish oils. So you can get something that's going to cost you $1,000 a tablet, or something that costs you $1 a tablet, and they're both going to have a very similar approach. So you need to have a good understanding about where you want to be, and then you need to understand what are the possible ways that you can get there. So like I understand where you want to get to, and I think that I help select the method by which you get there.
And great ideas on how to do it in a cost-effective manner, because we were on a shoestring budget doing this, like you said. We were pressing tablets in our kitchen.
Yeah.
I was mixing some of this stuff with some safety controls that were only good because I was only doing a couple 100 grams of it at a time as we were trying to figure it out. But
we were grinding the formulations in a pestle and mortar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so it's been invaluable to have these ideas to try and.
It's been a very satisfying evolution to see it go from that, to bootstrap it from that garage to the scale of manufacturing that you're now on.
Yeah, I mean, we went from, and it's one of those crazy things that, like you said, when we'd make 10 pills in a mortar and pestle, we didn't realize the complications of mixing on a large scale, because to mix this safely, this is weapons grade magnesium. We have to have numerous safety controls in place to have this quantity. But then even the mixing, the settling, how particles interact while being mixed, the speed, the RPM, the force that they're colliding, and we have like 30 steps that we have to do to mix it, because you can get a perfect result mixing 10, and then you put it in a big mixer and nothing works.
Yeah, and then part of that is some of these challenges could have been predicted, but there's always going to be cases of there's the unknown unknowns that you just come up, and you only experience them because you're doing that at that stage. But that institutional knowledge also brings added value to whatever you're doing in terms of the product manufacturing.
And some of this, these unknown unknowns that we were getting, I mean, they were unknown because nobody had done what we were trying to do, so nobody knew them.
And
so
and people aren't going to share their secrets with you, because in the same way that we wouldn't want to share our experience with potential competitors.
Exactly. I mean, you remember getting texts from me all the time, like you said, sometimes at 2 a.m, as I was obsessed reading every, publication on pharmaceutical formulation I could get my hands on, every advanced manufacturing, everything, talking to every consultant, hiring, and everyone's like, I've never heard of that happening before. What, you're using metal magnesium? I have no idea, like what could be going on there. And it went from, when we were, first pressing the ones by hand, you had the chemistry, perfect within a few weeks. And then it was bouncing ideas, late night calls and texts, like 1,000 iterative adjustments and 15 failed scale-up attempts before we had our first production ready tablet. Because it's those unknown unknowns. We're like, why is this happening? What is going on?
And there's still probably a few good ideas that were left on the cutting floor, I think, that at some point, bandwidth permitting, we could circle back and follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, some of the ones that we hypothesized would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment modifications, but I mean, we got it done on, again, the limited budget.
But it's nice to have, backups.
Yeah.
Put a pin in that, and then, you can always come and revisit at a certain time in the future.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate, talking to me today and letting our customers, put your face and voice to what I've mentioned.
And I just want to wish you continued success. I've seen your year-on-year growth over the last 2 years, and it's been impressive. And I hope that continues. And with your drive and enthusiasm, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't do.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you.